blood of the forests, the blood of the heart, and the clotted blood that lies within all that lives in death. Be you accursed! Every polluted step you take will be pierced by thorns. I hope that every time you put on a pair of socks, you step in a wet spot in your house. That's a really weird line.
Yeah, I think we've gone off script.
Greetings, everybody. I am Sir Gooey Lawrence, joined by my good friend here, Matt. And today we have a module that we are going to be breaking on down. Matt, what do you have for us today?
We're going to take a look at Blood for the Con, which is a module that Gooey Cube released from one of their Kickstarters. RP, puzzles, super crunchy combat. You can kind of do all of that with it, and everybody at the table is going to have a great time. The first part of Blood for the Con, Chapter 1, is Peculiar Brews, if you're looking in your Blood for the Con book. So there is a particular point in the story that you'll get to, and it's Chapter 2, is where Peculiar Brews ends and the rest of Blood for the Con begins. So it gives you an option to run it as a one-shot or as a multi-track kind of mini-campaign, if you will. You will find that Peculiar Brews is the bulk of the RP, the story, that kind of stuff, and then Chapter 2 is more dungeon crawl, combat, that kind of thing. The tone for this adventure it's kind of up to you. It can be super dark and grim, and there's all kind of spookies going on.
And that's the way that it's kind of set up and designed, and then you tailor it to your player base of what they're looking for.
And we do use the X and N cards at convention games where players, if something is getting close to a trigger point or something's getting too dark, they can let us know that. And there's lots of opportunities and ways in this to back it off, make it more lighthearted, and kind of give some relief from that tension before you put the tension back on.
Arachnophobia warning.
Arachnophobia warning, bird phobia warning. If you've seen the birds and that really bothered you, stay away from the Skullroot Caverns because it's really rough fighting all these swarms of birds. But the tone on it is it's dark, it's mysterious. There's a lot of really creepy animated skulls, undead animals, that kind of thing. So there are some warnings for that if your players seem sensitive to it.
And this is one of our larger modules. So Matt's going to give us some tips for playing this at home, and then as well as how to go through and streamline it for if you're doing it at convention play.
Sure. It is going to be a different experience when you're playing it at home with no timetable versus when you're trying to run it at a convention. You really do need to streamline some of it. There's a lot of fun combats, but we just don't have all time for all of that at a convention. So as a GM, especially as a convention GM, it's a lot about picking what you enjoy in here and keeping in mind several different things so that your players you can kind of keep an eye on their attitudes and see what they're enjoying. Some of the NPCs in here you could play as really super serious, or you could play them as super over the top and goofy, and just kind of give your players what they want out of that. See how they're interacting, as like Kim says, or Alfinia says, let the players dance with what they enjoy about it.
Now, with that, though, this does take place in the Mornwood, which is a very much haunted, terrifying thing. So that's where definitely interjecting some of that goofiness and some of that fun, definitely at specific moments, is going to help you maintain that really good, what I like to call table culture, or that feel of your table as you're moving through.
And there is options for both of that. There's some really crazy NSREs where you find like a bear skull on the side of the woods, and as they're going to examine it closer, it grows these little legs and kind of skitters off into the woods and super creeps everybody out. With that being in this haunted place that the Mornwood is, everybody who lives there is desperate. They're either a little bit cracked and they have these strange personalities, or they're criminal, or there's nowhere else for them to go. But it starts off with talking to the Arnolds, and they give you a quest that their brother is starting to get involved with some kind of shady people. And his new father-in-law calls himself the Con, and he's looking for this really dangerous relic to bring back to the Con called the Blood Crystal. In order to keep it from just being you meet people in a pub, we really don't like those a lot at Gooey Cube. Gooey Cube offers you several adventure hooks. The one that I like to use, especially if there's a new player at your table, is there is an adventure hook where one of your friends is a member of this group of mercenaries that has been hired before, and I like to make one of the players their friend. They knew them, and they've been putting out feelers all over Darkenhaven, and they found out that the Arnolds were the last group that the Steel Daggers, as they're called, works for. They meet them in this pub that there's a secret room in, and they're going to have a big discussion. And that's one thing I want to talk about. When you're running this for a convention game, there is like nearly a full page of dialogue of lore talking about geopolitical stuff that's happening that gives motivation to why the blood crystal is important. And we really need to trim that down for convention games. But at a certain point, you're going to have to draw the line and be like, these are the bare minimum facts you need to know. You need to know that you need to go to the Shallow Grave Distillery. There's a guy there they need to meet named Harkin. He's going to provide them room and board, give them as much information as he can on what's happened to the silver daggers and what they need for their baseline information. Going from there, though, they need to know that they have to keep this secret. Don't tell everybody what they're doing because, again, we're in the Mornwood. People there are desperate and a little bit less than completely truthful most of the time. So they need to keep an eye on them. That is really fun once they leave the Arnolds, they go through the Shallow Grave, or they head to the Shallow Grave into the Mornwood. I like to give them an NSRE there, something like the Forest Shambler, I think he's called. Maybe even throw in some of the Necrobloom skeletons there so that they start getting this idea that there's something weird and druidy and Necrosian going on there.
So I have a question for you, backing on up just a little bit. I always find it interesting when you go through and you have a party that meets up with a contact and they're like, okay, listen, don't trust anybody, but trust me. How do you execute that as a GM?
So it depends on your party again. A lot of parties, like the last party that I ran through, they were super antagonistic towards the Arnolds, and I had to keep reassuring them they're okay, but that led to some fun role play as well. It really led to some great tension there, and you can lean into that a little bit if you feel like that's where it's heading. But at the end of the day, that's why I like using the adventure hook that their friend is there, because trust the Arnolds or not, they're looking for their friend and this is their only lead.
Absolutely.
So that gives you more of a reason to not have like a 2-hour role play where they end up attacking the Arnolds because they don't trust them.
Players, work with your GMs on your backstories.
They offer an insane reward. It's like 5,000 gold or something. and a really powerful magical item if they will return the blood crystal to the Arnolds. If your players are being super resistant to it, offer them anything they want. Especially if it's a one-shot, because it's not like they're going to break the campaign when you give them 50,000 gold at the end of the module.
That's true. It's very true.
So they need that motivation, and if they're not taking it with your friend is missing, you need to go find them. Just kind of get them shoved down that road and get them going in the right direction.
Yep.
So now we've made it to a crossroads there, and this is where my favorite part of the campaign comes in. There is a sign in a crossroads that one way leads to the Shallow Grave where they need to go, and the other way leads to Adventuring Necessities. If they go down to Adventuring Necessities, they come up on a shop that has a couple of buildings there, and one of them looks like it's maybe a private dwelling, and the other one looks like it could be a shop. So if they enter there, they enter into Fiffendoon's various sundry shop, and I love Fergus Fiffendoon. This is him here. He gives you so many options as a GM to make a character that your players will enjoy.
Is this one of those adopt an NPC situations?
It could be, except he is incredibly high level.
Gotcha.
He's like a 6th level sorcerer and like a 9th level rogue. I mean, this guy is a monster. And so they come in and they just see him sitting on his desk in a room that's just surrounded with boxes. There's piles of stuff everywhere. And he's sitting at a desk with a ledger, and he's got an orange top that he's spinning every once in a while, and then he'll make notations. No idea what that does. It's not in the GM book.
Just checking to make sure it's balanced.
It's making sure it's balanced, making sure he's not in some sort of daydream, I guess. But the thing that I love to do with him is you can make him super serious and have him like juggle knives, spin a dagger on the tip of his finger. You can have him be super mysterious. I like to make him almost like clinically insane. I like him to be one of these kind of super out there personalities who are in the Mornwood because he's so powerful that he doesn't really have to worry about anything there. So I make him have a really weird voice. You give him...
Let's hear the Fiffendoon impersonation right now.
So I change it all the time.
Let's hear it.
So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll give him like this weird New York accent and just make him like super strange. Like, my name is Fergus Fiffendoon, and I'm 18 years old, and I'm the world's oldest little boy. And just like make him super over the top. And the thing that I love about him too is you can give your players an opportunity to search through his stuff because he has no idea what he has there.
For the record, Alphinius is the world's oldest little boy.
Yes.
But, you know.
But he's just got these piles of stuff everywhere. And so you can give your players an opportunity to roll on a table that's in the module. Just random little doodads and gadgets. None of them are super relevant to the story. They don't do anything. They're not really magic items. They're just really odd stuff like 4 candles made out of red material that might be blood, or a music box that plays, I think one is a music box that plays Myron the Ugly Troll. It plays the the chorus of Myron the Ugly Troll.
That'd be the cursed item that I would get. And it would just go off randomly. It'd be like an iPhone alarm that somebody just left on randomly. It's just playing off and just, oh my gosh.
So
the torture.
One of the things there that is important that I like to give the characters is if they can pass a perception check, they find a little waxen turtle. And the little waxen turtle behaves just like a normal turtle, but he moves around, he crawls on people. I like him to have him adopt somebody in the party and sit with them. What the players don't know is this thing is actually a spy for all of the Necrobloom druids who are out here in the woods. So he's kind of keeping an eye on what the party's doing. Fiffendoon doesn't remember seeing this thing. He's happy to give it to the party for like 10 gold. But discount it if they really want it.
And is Fiffendoon, is that whole encounter in NSRE or is that part of the...
It's in the main adventure, but they don't have to go there. Gotcha. I do like them to go there because what I like to do with Fiffendoon is when they find something, I have him gift wrap it for them. Especially in a convention setting. And what I do is I can use that later if they're really struggling in one of the big combat encounters of like giving them when they unwrap it, it's a wild magic surge.
Yeah.
So I have one of them like unwrap it or he unwraps a present and they learn that there's a wild magic surge there. And since these are things that they're not necessarily going to be using during the adventure, I can kind of cultivate that. And if they're in a really tough spot, I can have them like throw one of these presents at a monster and it casts like a 5th level magic missile or something crazy like that. Or if they're doing really well and they're just trying to take advantage of it, they throw it and it just explodes into bubbles or something.
I love the idea of like he goes over and he passes off the present to the party and he's like, open this up when your need is most dire. And then they walk immediately outside, open it up and then waste it. Like
yes. But you can spend some time there. Also, Fiffendoon, another really cool thing is if they try to steal from him, it's a really bad idea. Not only is he so strong, but he has these 2 huge metal golems in the back of his shop who are keeping an eye on things. Progressing from there, they're going to end up at the Shallow Grave Distillery, which is this really cool building that's just belching out all these really fragrant, acrid smells and all this beautiful different colored smoke. And I like to, when they get there, there's some people milling around outside. You can look at some of the rumors that are in here, maybe have them hear a couple of rumors. When they enter into the inn itself, there are a lot of people in there. I think there's around 10 people in there. There's a couple of bouncers, and there's all these little groups of people there. And as we talked about earlier, these are all the bad guys. This is the 7 Sabers, who are another mercenary group who's working on recovering the blood crystal. They're on the cover art of the handouts. But these guys are all scattered out there. They are all inconspicuous. They're all having their own separate conversations. They've done this before. They're used to blending in. They then go up to the bartender. The Arnolds have given them a special coin that will identify them to hearken when they get to this store. So they go up, they talk to the bartender, pay for their first round of drinks with that. He takes them into a back room and gives them the information that he has, which is basically a list of places that he knows that the other mercenary group had on their list of places to check out. So these are going to be the meat and potatoes of chapter 1, is them going to each one of these places and picking up clues. So I like to have them rest there for the evening, restore hit points if they were to lose a bunch against any of these lethal NSREs or anything. They wake up the next morning. Depending on how their RP goes, you could end up having a session break here. And so you could have them wake up the next morning. That'd be the end of our encounters. They made it. They meet all of these people. They can RP there with all of them. And then we cut to next session and we're on the hunt.
For background on the Shallow Grave Distillery, I'm guessing the significance of it is that, hey, this is one of the kind of like few safe places in the Mornwood. It's kind of that collective, like, hey, this is where you go kind of thing.
It's as safe as you can be in the Mornwood, kind of. Except that it's packed with a bunch of murderous mercenaries as well. But it is. And there are some really cool brews that they can get there that they should check out because they can give them some really wild benefits.
Okay.
They're kind of expensive, so getting them some gold early on is not a bad idea. To buy a bottle of this, each one of the liquors I think is about 40 gold.
I mean, when the Arnolds go through and hire you, you got to get half up front. So I mean,
just give them 5,000 gold to start with. I don't know if it's a great idea, but money doesn't matter much, especially in a con game here. There's not going to be a lot of places for them to buy stuff. If there's something they want that's not on their character sheet, Fergus can have it. Let them have their basic adventuring stuff. But the alcohol is going to be a big thing for them. One of them gives them a bunch of extra temporary hit points. One of them gives them +1 to AC. They're really great. We cut to the next morning. There's several places they can go to. There's Sever's Dark. There's a well that they can go check out. There's a place called Spiderdale, which if you've ever played Gooey Cube, there's definitely not going to just be a ton of spiders there that they have to fight. And then there's another one.
We really should put a disclaimer on all of our stuff that just says arachnophobia, like averse.
But they're all marked on this map that they have.
And then have correlating handouts.
They do have correlating handouts that show everything that's there. Yeah, so that's Sever's Dark. That's one of the places they can go. This is where your GM skill is going to have to really come in on pacing. Since there are so many, I think there's like 4 or 5 places they can visit. You really want to pace your table because at each one of these locations, they're going to find clues to what happened to the other adventuring party and what has happened with the Necrobloom Druids. That they're going to learn more about them being involved in all this stuff. There are lists of these clues in the books. There are a couple. The only one that I think is really mandatory is there's one where they're going to find an old hand. And in that old hand, there is going to be a fragment of a map. And that map is going to lead to another location that's not marked on their map, which is the Standing Stones, where our big boss encounter with the Necrobloom Druid is going to happen.
And obviously what we know is that based off of your pacing of the game and what you need to get done and whatnot, if you decide that your group really needs X, Y, and Z clues, then again, you decide, okay, you know what? I'm going to move this clue from this location over to this location where they're actually headed.
And so that's what's great is those locations, those clue locations aren't marked in the book. They're in the front of the book so that you place them where they need to be. So that way you can give them a couple of the greater clues that are smaller that they don't need. And then the last one should be the one with the map. So that's what's really great. And what makes this great for conventions is if they get to 2, they get to 2. If they get to 5, they get to 5. And then if they're still just really blitzing through somehow, throw some NSREs in there.
Are any of the clues red herrings or anything like that? Or is there anything that they should be aware of as far as just like, hey, heads up, if you're trying to keep your group focused, maybe avoid this one?
There's nothing that's a red herring necessarily. There are some of the rumors that you can have patrons dropping that are mostly true or kind of true. The things that they need are these clues, and they're going to be true.
One thing to remember that just as a GM, when you're presenting clues for a mystery and whatnot, it's very important that you understand how these clues are being interpreted. Yes. You may think that it's plain as day, but as a player, I may get my first look at it and I may interpret it and take me a totally different direction. So stay real synced up with your party so that way you can make sure that you're not leading them in the wrong direction when you're trying to fast track them through.
And the main thing is getting them that clue with the map. Now, if you do what I do with it and you like to use the friend angle where one of their friend is there, there's a clue called the Old Belt, the greater clue. I like to put like their name engraved on it or something so they know that the belt is gone. And then later put a dagger in the hand because there's a place where they find a dagger. Let them have that as a clue. And you can kind of lead them down. You can resolve that plot hook. Let them know that, hey, your friend didn't make it, and not so many words. And so you can kind of tie that plot hook back. Once you get through that, they're going to get a map to a Standing Stone Circle. The Standing Stone Circle, there's going to be a really cool encounter with this boss. It's like Stonehenge is what it draws inspiration from. And as the players show up, they're going to see that this stone in the middle, this altar, has started to crack. And as they approach it, there starts to be this light emitting from it. And eventually, from the woods will emerge this big, nasty necromancer. What the players don't know is this is just a simulacrum. It's made out of wax. This isn't the actual big bad of the adventure. He is just there to kind of cause problems for him. As well as all of his minions are also made of wax. If your players are using any kind of fire weapons, these things they take a lot of damage from fire. So this encounter can go pretty quick. The Necromancer can use some of his special abilities to heal a little bit, but you may have to fudge those numbers to give his health numbers to give them a sense of a more meaningful combat.
And if you're feeling really, really mean, just go ahead and give all of the enemies a ring of fire resistance.
Yes. That would be very mean, especially because that's the one thing that they have going for them is these guys are resistant to fire. So
not resistant, vulnerable.
Vulnerable, yeah. So as these things die, have him die. As he's dying, he has this really beautiful speech cursing the players where he says, like, they'll never know a night's rest. The air will burn in their lungs. They'll feel stones cutting at their feet every step that they take. And they do for the rest of the adventure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's actually really bad. And there's actually some really detrimental effects to their stats that are mentioned with this curse that don't go away until they deal with the blood crystal at the end of the next session.
Where's that speech at here?
It is right around here.
All right, folks. I used to be a thespian, so this is my best thespian by this, all right? By the blood of the forests But the blood of the heart and the clotted blood that lies within all that lives in death. Be you accursed! Every polluted step you take will be pierced by thorns, your beds as needles, and your lungs filled with wasps. You will know no relief or rest until your blood pours forth, your body rots, and all that remains of you turns to sacred soil. I hope that every time you put on a pair of socks, you step in a wet spot in your house. That's a really weird line.
Yeah, I think we've gone off script.
Okay.
So, as our necromancer falls, our druid, he's not a necromancer, he is actually a druid. It's just a very specialized form of
necrotic druid
magic. Yes, he's a necrotic druid. It's
which you can find out more about in the Mornwood campaign setting.
Absolutely. This whole thing is a big overarching plot to this. As a matter of fact, the Unseelie Fae who steps out, he's this really shady guy. He tells the party, I've been following you this whole time. And that's you can actually add some NSREs in where he kind of pops out of the woods and he sees them and he's like, I'm going to help you later, but not right now. And then kind of jets again. But he's going to come out and tell them that he knows where the blood crystal is and where these necrotic druids are. And as any time when you're dealing with any sort of fey creature, you want to know what his motivation is. His motivation is very simple. He did not like the court of Unseelie Fae that he was living with. So he's moved into these woods and somebody's messing with his woods and he wants them all out of his swamp. So,
donkey!
Yes. So this is the point where I like to wind down. For the second part, if you're running it as a 3-part. If you're running it as a 4-hour one-shot, you really have to super pare down the conversation with the Arnolds. You may even have to make it a cut scene where they're not interacting. You're just kind of giving them some narration on what's going on. Try to do at least Fiffendune you can cut down. I would still put him there because he's a great way for you to give them some benefits later, give them some healing potions if they don't have a healer, that kind of thing.
And that's just for a little bit of reference and stuff. Anytime that you have a Gooey Cube roleplay session where you want to go through and you need to cut down the time on it, basically all you do is you just rephrase that saying, hey, so over the next hour you talk with the Arnolds, they go over and they review over these things with you and they really harp on this kind of stuff. And then at the end they go through and say, hey, will you help us? That's the real quick, easy way to kind of change that tense, present that, and be able to cut out a bunch of role play if that is necessary for your tape.
Exactly. And you also have freedom with that to really, I think they only need to go to 2 of these locations. If you can give them the old belt and combine it with like another one of the greater clues and then give them the map. If you do that, I would steer them away from this particular encounter, which is the Skullrooks encounter, because there's not really any necro stuff happening there, necrotic stuff, and we really want to drive home that these necrotic druids are going there. So I would try to lead them to a different one where they can fight some of these necrotic druids. Maybe change your Forest Shambler NSRE to something that's more necrotic, which there's a lot of NSREs in there with necrotic skeletons and stuff. Get them the clues, get them to this boss battle. End it with that curse and then with the Unseelie Fae coming out and kind of telling them what's up. Because then if your players are super interested, if you're running as a GM at a table, it's going to make them more interested in finding out what happens later. And if you're running it as a 3-piece, then that gives you another really great place to end because what's happening after this is a big old dungeon crawl.
Now, I do have a question real quick, kind of going back to the different locations. So how do you kind of get that pacing where, let's say that you want to move them from this location where they're at, you know, what's the good way to go through and get the group, you know, that warm and fuzzy that's like, hey guys, you guys have searched everything. You guys are good to move on to the next thing and kind of help keep that pace up.
It's not as much of an issue with specifically Blood for the Con because most of the places they're going to are the bottom of an abandoned well. A cave. The Skullrooks encounter, if you go there, it's a cave filled with like 2 foot of bird guano. So they're places that the players aren't going to hang out with, and there's not a lot of other stuff there. There's going to be perception checks to see what they can see in there as well. If you want to put them in there and they do really bad, maybe make them like trip over something, bust their face, take a point of damage, but they find the thing you need them.
That's actually a really great mechanic to go through. Have there be a tiny bit of a penalty, but help keep it moving.
Yes, because then you get a fun moment too with them, and it can kind of break some of that tension and frustration. The next part of this really is a pretty grindy, big old school dungeon crawl, which Gooey Cube does really well. That's one of the things that we started out with in some of our early modules, like What Gooey Webs, which is a part of Red Star Rising. So it's something that Gooey Cube has really worked on and perfected. The thing about it is, if you've ever run Gooey Cube stuff before, you know that we have all these really great maps. My thing about running this as a convention setting is I would potentially, for the big map of the dungeon crawl, I don't know that in a convention setting, if I would actually use that. if you're running it for us as a convention GM, we like to have dry erase boards on the table for you. But since it is such a big dungeon, so that you can kind of keep that pace going and the players don't feel like they're being rushed, what you could do is either cover it in Post-it notes and peel off sections so that you can still use the really beautiful maps. You can use that dry erase marker to sketch out where you need them to go, and you can kind of block off or leave out some of the rooms that are distractions or they're not plot critical, so that you can keep the pace going and you don't have that player who needs to go in every room, and then you end up in your last room and you're super rushed.
I mean, it's very easy just to go through and say, hey, that passage is caved in. You guys don't think you're going to be able to get past it in any kind of fast.
Especially because there is potential for some really great role play, even in the middle of this dungeon crawl. There's a super cool character there who is, so these necrotic druids, they're resurrecting beasts, they're resurrecting people, they're doing all this stuff, but they all come back with no will. Mm-hmm. In this dungeon, there is one that for some reason she's retained her sense of who she is. And let me see if I can find some art in here. Her name is Sweet Al, is what everybody calls her, or Allie. And we really love her. But she's actually, despite her horrific look, she's really sweet. She's maintained her semblance of who she is. Mm-hmm. And she has some clues that she can give the party towards there's a puzzle at the end of the dungeon that she can provide them some feedback on and help them solve it. If you have time and your party hasn't gotten super bogged down, if they get to the puzzle and you're running out of time, just have the door already be open. And just somebody has solved it. Maybe Sweet Allie says, oh, I got here earlier and I was twisting around on it and I got it working. That last puzzle, it's really just going to depend on your pacing.
And I always recommend when it comes to puzzles are always going to be harder than what you think they are for the players.
Yes.
So definitely err on that side of, you know, hey, either do I have an escape room master like Cameron Mandy, or do I have some guy who just wants to kick down the door and kind of make that judgment call for you?
And now that does come after our last big boss fight, which is the actual real version of this druid that they're fighting. Mm-hmm. So for that last boss fight, I like to give my players about 30 minutes to get through that fight. Mm-hmm. And then 20 minutes if you're kind of rushing it to get through that final role play of grabbing a blood crystal, returning to the Arnolds, that kind of stuff.
And for a 4-hour convention block for this section, you basically need to make sure that at the 3-hour mark, you're at that final boss battle to give you that time for the combat and then that time for the final wrap-up role play.
And we do like to end, our GMs know this, we do like to end like 10 minutes early so that our people have the time to go to the next block. But yeah, you definitely want to get that. And if you have to, it's actually not bad to rush them past the blood crystal. So when they grab it, a lot of players are going to be wanting to keep the thing for themselves because it's really powerful.
Sure.
But that's really bad. And if they do, in your amazing book that Gooey Cube has, he has written down things of
like corruption
or bad things that can happen if they keep it. Mm-hmm. And there's also plot hooks for this group comes in and rushes and grabs it. Like the Unseelie Fae could come back, grab it from him and say, I want this out of my woods. I don't want you to have it. I can't trust you. But then you can get them back to the Arnolds, have them turn it over, give them a really lavish reward. If they're into that kind of role play, do like a big feast and tell them all of the stuff that they have and kind of shut it down from there. But that's why I almost recommend with this big dungeon crawl, if you use the dry erase marker map, you can kind of curate that dungeon to your needs. And that's one thing I really love about it for a convention game. Now, at your home game, I'm going to be using this thing as a huge map. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to crawl through every inch of this dungeon. But
throw it up on the TV, go through.
Yeah, but it's pacing. And I think that's the strength as a GM when you're running this adventure. The strength of this adventure is that it can be paced really easy by trimming unnecessary parts, putting things where you need them, and kind of cutting out RP a little bit if they're not as into it, cutting out some of the combat if they want to just RP. And that's what makes this adventure great.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to make it wonderful for our conventions.
And I should really throw in there, just for reference, so the huge dungeon that we're talking about is a 12-room dungeon. However, something that Gooey Cube does a little bit differently than a lot of other dungeons is that even if you have a 50-room dungeon for like another module, there might be nothing in 30 of those rooms. Whereas almost in every one of our rooms, either you have an option to add in an NSRE, there's going to be a role play on top of a combat. There's going to be a considerable amount of content per room.
And there's going to be goodies for them to get, which you can kind of move around where those goodies are if there's something really fun. But This is why I like this last dungeon to be one entire session.
Mm-hmm.
You should probably be able to get through all of it, but just in case there is room, especially if they get bogged down with Sweet Alley or there's something going on Sweet Owl, if they get something going with that. And you can, if you want to use the map, you can have them come up to a joint and like say, it's caved in here, you can't get through. I mean, you can direct them where you need them to go.
Especially if you're streamlining it for a convention game, or just if it's for your home game and you have different things that you want to go through and hit.
It's a great adventure. I mean, it's solid. The plot line is super motivating, especially if you use those adventure hooks. It's great that they're kind of pushed into doing this dungeon and they can't just leave because they're cursed. It adjusts their stats. It's really easy to tune. It's a joy to run as a convention game.
And standard thing for all of the Gooey Cube products, you're going to get your adventure book, you're going to get your GM reference guide, you're going to get portraits, you're going to get a whole bunch of special item cards, your Gooey rewards, your maps, both player and GM versions, as well as all your handouts as well.
And there's a lot of handouts in this one.
Yes, there are.
Because there's a lot of NSREs that you can really sink your teeth into. So as far as managing materials for this one, because there are so many things in it, what I like to do is pick out in my stack, I pick out the things that I need them to do. I need them to go to the Shallow Grave Distillery. I need them to go to a couple of these locations. So I'll have those in one of my piles separately. And then for my NSREs, I kind of prioritize them on what I think is most fun. And then I'll just like grab one off the top of this is the one that I like. It feels like they need an NSRE. So I have that to hand and it's one that I have memorized better. And so it's easier to handle the materials because there's just so many handouts.
And that's basically after you go through, especially for a convention, and you streamline down and you say, okay, hey, I want to hit 2 or 3 of these locations. You choose those out, you go through, you take the handouts for the other locations, go ahead and set them aside, put them inside of your folder and stuff for later. You take out the portraits that you're not going to need, just the ones that are tied up to those locations. Same thing with the special item cards. And you're going to be able to pare down these materials so that way you're real lean and mean when you go into your convention game.
Yeah. And one thing that Gooey Cube, I will say, has always done good about is your NSREs, if they're numbered, which I keep all mine in numbers sequenced because I have to do that. The NSREs are always towards the back. So generally the things that you need are going to be boom, boom, boom in order. But if you're throwing an NSRE in there, sometimes you have to kind of curate where they're at in the stack. So that's why I like to do 2 stacks. But
that's why definitely if I had a convention binder and stuff, I'm going to go through and I'm going to have a slip sleeve where it's just my NSREs. I know the order that they're already prepped in. Maybe I go through and I'm getting myself a ball card sheet, and that's where I'm going to go through and put the extra special item cards and stuff like that, and just really get yourself set up so that way you don't have all this spread out behind your table. You can really just have the essentials that you really need.
Yeah. And I guess my overarching idea behind this is this module, more than any other that I've played with Gooey Cube, lets you tailor the experience that you're having and that your player's having to your strengths and their desires. You're not forced into doing big combats if you don't want to, if your players aren't into it, especially if you have new players who are taken by one thing. So this is going to give you a module that you can use to play to your strengths. And if you're having fun, we always say this, if you're having fun, your players are having fun. Pick NSREs that you enjoy, that seem like they're going to be fun. Give characters, if you want to make Fergus super hardcore and like edgelordy and that's your thing, go for it. Your players are going to enjoy that too. But it gives you that room to dance and do things the way you want to.
Definitely at your home table and at your convention table, go through, figure out what motivations or what motivates your players as you're kind of leading them around. That's going to help you out with your pacing, being able to say, hey, you know what, this party's really motivated by gold and reward and stuff. I'm going to put some extra rewards in here. Maybe they're motivated by the role play and the story, so I'm going to go through, I'm going to use these things. Once you understand what your players get really excited for, that's going to help you tailor the pace for whether or not it's a convention game or even if it's your home game.
Yeah, and you have all the tools to do that here. So in conclusion of the module as a whole, I love that it lets you choose your style, your adventure. It gives your players a chance to fall into the grooves that they want. Just enjoy it. Take your time. Plan things. Have your adventures, your NSREs planned and in your head, at least the bones of them, so you kind of know where they're at. You don't have to know all of them for a convention game, but it's good to have a few picked out so you can toss those in there. But other than that, the module kind of runs itself. It's really bulletproof.
It definitely seems like it's super adaptable.
It is very adaptable. It lets you do things the way you want to do them, which, I keep harping on that, but that is the overall point, and what I love so much about Blood for the Con is it lets you play your way.
Nice. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
This
anytime.
has been our GM review of how to play Blood for the Con, available for hopefully a long time at all of the conventions that we go to. We hope that you enjoyed this, and ready to sign off?
Yeah.
May all your adventures be sticky.